Welcome to the Blackout Show, presented by the Guillen Grid, a show about the Chicago White Sox baseball, the good, the bad, the ugly. We'll debate what's working and what's not on the south side of Chicago. It's old school versus new school baseball. And most importantly, we're keeping all the receipts.
Yo, what is up, everybody? It's Gonzo here, and with me tonight in studio is OJ. OJ, welcome back with us on the show. OJ, what has been your thoughts as of lately?
Well, I'm glad to be back. I couldn't join last time when you guys got on. Great show. From a personal standpoint, just back on the grind and happy to be back in Chicago. From baseball, that's what we're here to talk about. I've actually been to the Sox game a couple times already this year in person. Obviously, the new Ozzie Senior and the new channel and the new studio, which is really cool. They got set up there in the left field top corner. Really cool experience. That's been fun already. And then I've gotten to watch a more optimistic team. Obviously, coming off a great series versus the Boston Red Sox. We get to hang out with Alex Cora. Obviously went into the stadium and said hi to him, but I very optimistic. Obviously I think that the record's should be a little bit better than what they're showing, but there's a lot of positives all around on the team in the way that things are looking.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the talk of I don't want to say social media, but just watching this series and perfectly, in tune with the schedule here with today, you had Chris Crochet going up against, our boy, the Rule 5 pick, Sean Smith, and Crochet took a no-hitter going deep into the ball game, and who to break it up but the guy that we got in the deal for him, and the third headliner of that package, which is Chase Meidroth, which we can say, welcome to the show, kid, right? Because Chase Meidroth, he literally broke up the no-hitter, but in his debut on Friday, walked 3 times with a single. That kid had one hell of a series, and you were there for most of the weekend, so go ahead.
I was. So I said on the Guillen Grid social media page, it was me tweeting that time. Obviously, we share the page amongst us, but it was me when I sent out the tweet that, should we adopt for all the Moncada fans? I don't have a player right now on the team. And actually, you've mentioned the 2 players that I really, really like right now that I'm following, Smith and Meidroth. I hope I don't butcher his name. I'm a baseball fan, so I look at players and I'm like, do I want to watch this player play the game? And what I like the most about him is that he's an OBP guy. He knows himself as a baseball player. And when you saw him playing in spring training and kind of making those adjustments to the team and to the pitching, and he struggled, then you start seeing his at-bats in the AAA games, and then you saw seeing his at-bats in the big league level. You're looking at adjustments that he's making. And he had to start at shortstop, which is not his natural position, and he played it well. A guy that can, kind of fix the gap for games when you need him. He's at second. If he pans out, he'll be a natural second baseman, but a utility guy. But I like how he goes out and plays. He's not when you go out to scout, he's not a guy that's gonna sell you with the way that he looks. He's a short guy. not your typical baseball body type, but he's a grinder. And I don't want to bring his name up, but I'm going to have to. When people talked about Nick Madrigal, Nick Madrigal got picked in the first round, first 3 rounds or whatever. He was a White Sox first pick, right?
Yeah.
And they try to sell him like he was Jose Altuve. And you look at this kid and you're like, this kid's a better player than Nick Madrigal. Just a baseball player, the way that he goes about his business. So when you're in the big leagues, he was there. He's been here for a short time, but he hasn't looked outmatched. That's been something in the White Sox struggles where I'm looking at some prospects and I'm like, this guy looks outmatched, especially in the Cleveland series with the fastball. You're like, this. I don't think this certain guy or that guy is ready for the big leagues, or his timing's a little off. But this kid came up and he's a grinder. That's the word. I read a couple scouting reports. That's something that he's always been labeled that. University of San Diego baseball players, they tend to develop good baseball players. This is a kid that probably since he's been in travel baseball, it's like, it's not the kid that you're going to pick first, but he's always on the team. And he's one of those guys that keeps, exceeding expectations. And that's something that you need in baseball. Didn't get a huge signing bonus, $200,000, $272,000 probably. So it's not a guy that, okay, I'm going to be fine financially if I don't make it, which is a lot of the first picks, they get a couple mil. Sometimes that becomes a struggle because they know they're going to be fine. So the development takes a slower time. He's developing well. Am I going to come out here and say that he's going to be a 5-time All-Star? No. But do I think that he has the grit to make himself a very good baseball player? Absolutely. And that's kind of like a Will Benable. It's kind of that style of baseball player that Will was, and the general managers Chris gets. A lot of guys that they weren't gifted with a lot of talent. And he uses the one thing in his arsenal that can make him great is getting on base. Getting on base. And that's going to be something that's going to be extremely helpful. And for the games that we've seen, he's got a really good eye at the plate. Plate recognition. You don't see him chasing a lot. And now what I'm talking about, I'm comparing him, for example, like Lenny Sosa, who looks like he's kind of like lost the zone a little bit, chasing a lot of balls. That usually happens when guys come up. Big show, the big leagues. I don't care how good AAA is. You're not facing anybody like Crochet, for example, or guys in the pen. And he looked like he can handle it. And he's a guy that when he's on the field, you want to watch. And I think that for the way the South Side baseball is built, the Sox fans are going to love this kid. He's a kid that, he's going to be out there and he's going to be hustling, because that's just the way he's had to play his whole career in baseball, not just in professional baseball, but I'm assuming throughout his whole life, just because of his makeup. So I think that at worst, he'll be a utility guy that you'll probably be seeing being like, he's one of those guys that you're like, wow, he's got 8 years in the big leagues, because he'll find a way to play anywhere. But he keeps developing. He's a guy that could, take the second base position, a position that you just want a guy that catches a ball. And if he can get on base, great. But it's not a position where you're like, I need a Gold Glover. It's really nice when you have that in a second baseman, but it's a position that you can if you can develop a guy like this into becoming an everyday, and he's going to get the shot to do it here on the Sox. It's a big win for the team. And again, not a huge prospect, but big part of that trade for Crochet. I think out of all the guys that got traded, if they keep developing like him, because he was probably the weakest link on that draft board. He was probably the last guy added. The other players that they brought in that trade were definitely higher ranking, with a way higher ceiling. So promising. It's a promising win for, and I don't want to jinx him. And again, I don't think people should have expectations that he's going to go out there and be an all-star, but he'll definitely be a fun guy to watch. And if he keeps doing what he's doing at the way that he's doing it, I think that he'll surprise some people.
So I feel with what you just said, talking about, putting the emphasis on utility, right? With the guys that we've seen being utility guys have been subpar. So when you're looking at their system in Boston for that trade package, Boston didn't want to give this guy up. And the fact that you held a little bit longer to get him included in that deal and pulled the trigger on it, that's a true guy that you were feeling his ceiling, that of a utility position player with versatility. that's the guy that's above that level, that bar, but you still have to develop that player, and especially at the major league level. And the fact that he's coming up and he's showing that, high, not only just the on base percentage, but the walks and the discipline in the box, knowing his zone. It's key because we saw in spring. I remember, well, I was gonna say Slavko, but he's dealing with the sinus problem right now, but he won't be with us tonight. But last show, Slavko asked me right away, who do you feel like should came up from camp to break the roster? And then I brought up, I don't think he was expecting it because I think he was expecting Teal, but I said Meidroth right away. And he got on me a little bit about that because of what he showed, for stats wise for spring training. But I told him, my opinion on that was what Boston was talking about Meidroth, last season. And with the emphasis on the on base percentage, I felt like that's a guy who was ready at the end of last year to get the call up. And I felt like he can do that at the major league level. And I didn't think that whatever happened in spring training would jeopardize that. And I really felt good and of why I actually put him on my prediction side of it, breaking camp. I felt like he can do that at the major league level. And sure enough, he's showing it. And it's a good team versus Boston that he's shown that against too. So go ahead.
No, I think that it wasn't that crazy of a pick because it's a guy. So when we talk utility guys, you think like, oh, he's a washed up guy. He's only 23 years old. So it's a perfect utility guy because in the White Sox, there's a lot of positions where you don't have guys that are kind of set in stone for that position. Okay, so you have to figure ways to win games, kind of fill guys that are you're moving them around the lineup, outfield or infield. And for him, for example, to be able to get a start at shortstop, which is probably the hardest one to play as a utility, and me seeing him, and allegedly defense is not his thing, he looked better than a lot of guys that are the prospects in those positions. Is he going to be the everyday shortstop? No. But it's like, wow, okay, this guy can play. He probably can play third. It's a lot easier. You can play second. But for me, it's the at-bats. And one of the and this is coming from experience being around spring training, when you're looking at the development of a player, a lot of people get caught up on the stats of a spring training. You have to see who they're facing. There's a lot of guys that kill spring training, that have crazy numbers in spring training, but they're facing like guys that are like not making the team, really young arms, blowout games, really favorable matchups. And other times you got guys that are struggling, but they're facing the better, they're facing the starting pitching of from teams in the big league team. So I think that they might have seen something in the development of like, hey, the stats don't really matter. But what I like was that when you look at the way that he went from spring training to AAA, the short mindset of like not struggling for a long time, that's awesome. Because when you see a guy either kill it and do great and then doing really good for a while and then going in really long slumps, in baseball, you're going to struggle. It's a mental game. So I don't know the kid personally, but it seems like he's got that grit of like just going out and competing every day. And that's what you need at the big league level, because this belief that you're going to get called up and you're going to come up and you're going to be a stud it's really unrealistic. And only so many guys can do it on either pitching or hitting, where you can come up and just be an all-star right off the bat. You're going to have to learn how to struggle and fight your way through it. And I feel like mindset is really, really, really important. And I love the fact that he's not a top prospect, because when you look at guys like Nick Madrigal, he's a washed-up player. It's only because where he was put in the draft. Gordon Beckham, for example. If Gordon had been a later pick, you would think he had a great career. But since he was a top pick, you're like, oh, what a wasted pick. He wasn't a superstar because of how high he was picked. But with him, those are when you look at major league rosters, you can go on Fangraphs and look at it. You don't see guys in the starting 9 position all drafted in the first 3 rounds. You see a lot of guys drafted in later rounds. That means that they were developed. So in a realistic lineup to a team, he fits that criteria. So
to be fair, though, I do want to say at least with Madrigal and anyone that was drafted by the last general manager, but on that same point, when Madrigal first came up, he was showing that skill getting on base. The base running was totally different, but at least for the offensive side of it, he was getting on base. And I really feel it's just unfortunate for Madrigal. Not only was he drafted that high, but he was drafted to this organization with Han at the helm and
correct. He wasn't developed. They didn't develop him well. I think he might have been brought up too soon. But a kid like Meidroth, like he's had success in the minor leagues.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at the progression, it was a perfect timing to bring him up, and it's up to him to succeed or fail. And it's going to get into one of our other topics with another player that we've been talking about. It's killing it down there with Elko. At some point, you have to bring him up. Okay. At some point, you have to say, hey, when are we going to pull? When we're going to pull the decision on bringing him up and seeing if the guy has it in the big league level, because it doesn't guarantee that you're hitting 300 in 300 a bunch of home runs in AAA that you're going to do that in the big leagues, and it doesn't guarantee that if you're hitting 250 that you won't succeed at the big leagues. Maybe you need that.
We'll get to Charlotte a little bit here, but before we move on, OJ, I wanted to talk a little bit with what you're going forward there with positions. I agree with you completely. Second base, I think that's where he's going to be in the near term here. However, I love how Stoney on the broadcast said that he loved for that they're putting emphasis on putting him at shortstop so he can fail there or take it and just, move him later. But also on that same case, and I want to transition here a little bit, but a guy like Brooks Baldwin, who is primarily an infielder, I'm not sure if this is an Getz or Will think probably Getz with putting him in the outfield. But I also completely realize as I'm looking at the 26-man roster here, a lot of those depth outfielders are injured. So unfortunately, I believe that they're moving Baldwin out to the outfield to cover for a little bit because the infield's pretty loaded. So to get those reps in, they're moving him into the outfield for some versatility. And I want to get to a play in a little bit. We'll do it in Will's way, but it sucks because I hate seeing Brooks out in the outfield, but at the same time, I understand it. And I really hope here they figure out some way to get him with at least for the next week or so with a shortstop of Meidroth, and then second base Brooks, third base, hopefully Sosa or Vargas duo or whatever. But ultimately in the beginning, before this whole Meidroth was still in spring training, I thought he'd be second base and third base because I know he does have the arm for third base, but I don't think you can. I mean, you can put him there, but when Ramos is healthy, you should bring Ramos up and let Ramos, Vargas, Sosa get reps there. Keep Meidroth up the middle. Any thoughts on the whole Baldwin positioning?
So I think that number one most important thing for Baldwin is to keep taking ground balls every single day. And keep working with the infield instructor so those skills don't get diminished. He fits into that role of like, he's not a player that you just go in and put at one position and say, here, go, this is your position, go fail, and not move it around. The White Sox don't have that luxury. I think that it's also backfired on them in the past where they've just giving a guy a position and the guy's completely failed. I think in modern day baseball, you see a lot of guys moving from the infield and outfield. I think that he has a versatility to kind of compete. I think it brings up his trade value, his value as a player. I think he's actually looked really good in the outfield. But you got a guy like, for example, a Venezuelan player, if people remember him, Cesar Hernandez. Most people don't remember he came up as a center fielder. Alexei Ramirez, also an outfielder in his first year in the big leagues, and then eventually went to second and then to shortstop because Ozzie at the time and Kenny, they knew that Alexei couldn't break camp as an infielder. You had Joe Creedy, you had Uribe. You had a couple players there that Alexei couldn't really break it, but so they knew that to break remember he made his debut versus Cesar Sabathia in Cleveland and he was in the outfield. But he's a player, another guy that you look at him and he's like, man, that kid's a baseball player. And it's going to be a competition for anyone that thinks that they're going to get to the Sox and you're guaranteed a position. That's not the case. And he'll find himself in the infield eventually. That puts more pressure on Lenny and Sosa. What's going to happen with Brian? If everybody's healthy and doing well, we might see Vargas become the full-time DH. because he's not known for his defense. If it makes the team better defensively, especially with this pitching staff. But I think that those guys have to show up every day and play wherever they're available. Even the guy Manton, the number 0. I don't know why he picked that number, but he's been DHing every single time.
Yeah.
He's the guy that you usually see him on the field, and he's played second and he's played first, but he's a guy that can play multiple. But we've seen 9 of his starts have been at the DH position, so it's a weak DH because I think that could be the position for Elko. But again, you bring Elko up, it doesn't have a lot of places where he can play. It's either going to be DH or first base. But with a guy like Baldwin, he gives you options. And when you have injuries, you have to kind of like move the situation around. And I think Baldwin, but it's another player that you're looking at their development, and they're all competing. And they're young enough that they're playing themselves for an everyday big league spot and put them in their best matchups possible.
Perfectly said. Now, I want to get us to the second player you brought up earlier, and let's talk more about our pitching staff, because I know you haven't really got to touch on it too much lately. I think the 2 most impressive guys are going to be Shane Smith and Sean Burke. I'm not sure if you missed it, OJ. I said Sean Burke. One of my bold predictions was him representing the White Sox at the All-Star game this summer, but I want to more so focus on Shane Smith, the Rule 5 pick, our first pick of the Rule 5 draft. Kid's been lighting it up, just to say the least. But more importantly, I want to put emphasis on the Rule 5 because I thought Dustin May said it in his podcast, but he was talking about the Rule 5 selection. So essentially, I just want to explain a little bit to our listeners that at the end of the day, Sean Smith is gonna be here this season. He's not gonna go anywhere, because if he plays the whole season at the MLB level, we get the control of the next 6 years of his service time. So no matter what happens at the trade deadline, this is a guy that's going to stay here. And no, look here, before I go anywhere else on this, OJ, I love the kid. I love everything about him, and I love the production that he's starting, his time here. However, I think we also have to remember that we're still, until Luis Robert is traded, he's the last asset to end this rebuild before you got all of that value and, value that you got in assets back since Chris got started as GM here. But you have to consider when next season starts, if he continues on this path with this rate that he's going at, that's 6 years of control for a 25-year-old. You can get a lot back for that, especially at that production and control. So Chris Getz is going to come to a point, and it's going to be next, not this year or this trade deadline, but next year. Anywhere up from the spring training until the next trade deadline next year, he's going to have to decide, is this a guy that's going to be, and I know we've talked about it, the back end of our rotation, is it going to be 4 and 5 with Burke and Smith, and we're going to keep a 25-year-old for the next 6 years for that value, or not only the control, but financials of that value and control? But we can do that, keep him, or trade for that value and fill some more holes on this roster, or I should say not the roster, but the lineup, because we know that the holes are still there. It's going to be quite the conversation and debate I foresee coming up. Again, a lot of things have to hit, right, OJ, because he has to continue at that production. But regardless, if he's back end of our rotation of the future, or regardless, a contender still needs arms regardless, right? You can't go wrong with having as many arms as you can get. But we also know that we're an organization that can develop arms. So, and I want to bring it up, like I have before, at the end of the day, we know our organization can develop arms, but the last GM couldn't develop position players, and it hasn't been yet to be seen yet if Chris Getz can. Hopefully he can, because I love the kid Braden Montgomery that we got back in that Crochet deal. But there's going to be a lot more players either traded for assets in a Robert deal or etc., or position players that he's going to draft with the 10th selection this July, or probably the number 1 pick the following year, because we're probably going to get the 1 pick. OJ, what do you say about Shane Smith and everything else? I know I went on a tangent there. Sorry.
No. You hit some point. It's a really good problem for Chris Getz and the Chicago White Sox to have. Okay, you get a guy in the Rule 5 draft. A lot of people don't give credit to Rule 5. It's a very strategic way to build your organization, especially if you hit on a guy. And if he's pitching well, the only way you get rid of a Rule 5 guy is if he's really, really, really just dog doo-doo. Okay. Yeah. But he hasn't been. And there's a lot of confidence in him. There's a lot of maturity in him. Again, he's been around the block a little bit longer. But when you look at the control time, okay, I know that we play this game of fantasy of when we have this perfect rotation because all these guys are in AA and they're throwing the ball so well. I don't know if they can do it at the big league level. Okay. And if I see Shane Smith, a guy who doesn't seem to be very injury prone, the risk, like a guy like Crochet, for example, which we've debated a lot. They gave him a lot of money, which he was very smart to take, but he can get broken at any single moment. Okay. And those guys are oh my God, they're lights out guys, but they're always going to be injury prone. Okay. More than other guys. And again, injuries happen. It's just part of the game. It's more of a draw of the luck, I should say. I said that wrong. But I like him because either he could be great trade bait eventually down the line, or he could be a guy that could be in the staff. The White Sox at some point, okay, this is something that, and I don't want to bring the number window up, but at some point you have to commit and say, when are we going to start letting guys play in the big leagues and we're going to stop bringing in prospects? Because then you become the Pittsburgh Pirates, where it's just prospect, and you can get drafted in the first round and not make it to the big leagues in the next 6 years. Okay. So if you have what I like about Burke and Smith is that when you're seeing them on the mound, and the guys that have been on the staff right now, White Sox are ranked, I think, 4th or 5th in the American League, 11th in Major League Baseball in pitching, that you might have to go out and spend some money in the free agency market and get yourself some good position players. Okay. Because you might get one superstar in your minor league system offensively, but you're not going to hit on 4 or 5 guys offensively in the minor leagues. You're not. It's very hard to build that way. So you're going to have to fill in those gaps maybe with guys that are more veteran big league players, kind of like those stopgap guys to get more wins under your belt. And that's what they're going to have to decide, because when you look at the value, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show, but when you're looking at value projection, what Smith brings you is those 6 years of control. You're not paying ridiculous money for a starting pitcher, okay? So if you compare him to Martin Perez, for example, and if they both keep kind of doing the same thing that they've done this year, which again, Martin would be great trade bait as well. But you're looking at the projections, then you say, okay, Martin Perez got me the same production as Smith, but Smith was 1 fraction of the cost. That's what you want in control and players. Even if a guy is not lights out, Cy Young candidate, you still need to have those guys that eat the innings, that are going there and competing. And that's what he's giving you a shot. In today's game with Crochet, it looks like an L in the record books, but he gave your team a chance to win. You put that start versus with a good offensive team, you put that start with any of the great offenses the White Sox have had in the past, you got a really good chance. So I've seen guys go through this organization where, people would cry and cut their veins for and ask for extensions, from Giolito to, I can name a million guys, Lance Lynn, veteran guys that had the names. And when you look at their production, they just had names. They didn't have their numbers were okay. They didn't have the name, but the production was the same as a guy like a kid that can come up. So when you look at the wins above replacement stat, that's what you're looking for. So unless you're going to get a lot in return and it's big league ready guys that that are close to the big leagues and have been developed, and you can plug them in and that's going to be your plan, you better be sure the pitchers that you're bringing up are going to pan out, because then what you don't want is that you have a lot of guys that can hit, but you don't have anybody that can throw the ball. Pitching is the most most important commodity here, winter ball, Japan, Korea, Mexico, everyone's looking for arms. If you put Smith, for example, on that Boston Red Sox staff, or the Cubs that had one of their guys just go down, they want him badly. Okay, they want him badly, because it's if he keeps doing what he's doing, and I like his makeup. I like the way that he throws the ball. Again, you think that when you have a guy come up to the big leagues, he's going to be a little bit overmatched, but he's pitched himself. You know, he competes, and that's what you want in a pitcher. Just go out there and compete. So the makeup of the pitcher, again, he's not a, oh my God, a first round pick, you know, lights out, 99 miles per hour, Michael Kopech type of guy. Again, we love marketing guys, but he's a guy that can compete. And for the White Sox, health and competing has been something that has been lacking for a long time. And he throws strikes and he competes. So I think that you ride him out and see what you have with him. Same thing with Burke. And I think the White Sox, one of the positives of the White Sox has been that pitching staff and the bullpen in the days that has worked. Their pitching has definitely been their bright spot. But I always say that it's so dangerous when, oh yeah, we develop pitching. It's like, okay, you know, how much longer can you develop pitching for? Cleveland has been doing it for a long time, but even Cleveland has locked in a couple position players and signed guys, you know, so you at some point you got to commit. And I'm not saying a window to win a World Series, a window for playoffs, but at some point you say, okay, when am I going to bring this guy up to start his big league development? You know, we just talked about earlier about Carroll and Lee, you know, was also part of that that was part of that trade. You know, he's looking at if Carroll pans out at the catching position, Leaf, who's also a catcher, he should be taking ground balls and out and maybe some fly balls, because he might, you know, you can't have two really good catchers playing in your team. So, you know, he's the most athletic guy out of the two, unless you bet on one of them and then you trade, which I don't see you doing that. Or, you know, you bet to be really sure of the player that you're getting in return. So I think that the one of the things we're going to be talking a lot about here in the Blackout Show is going to be the pitching. And it's been a bright spot because even in games that they've blown or not pitched or done well, the pitching has been consistent. And that's where you have not seen guys be outmatched. The hitting side, there's been games where I'm like, wow, there's a couple guys that I've thought that they were outmatched at the big league level. I don't see that with the pitching. I've seen that they've been able to compete against some pretty decent offenses, and they've been able to compete. Again, colder months, advantage for the pitchers, but you can't knock what they've done. And if they keep throwing the ball that way, you know, got to give credit to Katz. You know, it's probably been his best start for a season for him on the arm side. So it's working. And again, you can never have enough pitching. That's not if you can have pitching, you can always trade for bats. And that's definitely something that definitely will help the White Sox in this getting back to playoff contention.
Right. And for me, at the end of the day, Shane Smith is turned out to be quite an asset for a Rule 5 pick, because he's either going to help that back end of the rotation, or depending on how Getz fills this lineup in, if Getz misses on some of these draft picks on Colson Montgomery or you know, potentially Colson or others, Shane Smith is an asset that can fill that in the trade if a team's going to overpay for an arm. So,
correct.
It's something that I just wanted to, you know, us to feel out, because if we don't feel it out, other content creators will. But it's something to think about. And at the end of the day, that's just, you know, something that Chris Getz will have to be on top of, and we'll see how it goes. But OJ, I have a segment. You know, I know it. Used to be Grafal's Grounds, and now it is Will's Way.
The most important thing is to just set really clear expectations for our group and how we're going to go about our day and the things that we're going to do to build a foundation to be the kind of team we want to be. But it's also about cultivating a winning culture and being passionate about coming to work every day and creating a positive environment where people know that We're going to face some tough times like everyone does across the league, but at the end of the day, we're going to do all the things that we need to do to go out there and compete and play hard, holding each other accountable to things that you've set expectations for. But get ready, because we're going to go out there and play good baseball. It's going to be exciting. We hope to see you out in the field.
All right, bro. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I've got one play in particular I really want to highlight. However, I want you to go off on a rant because you were there for opening day and this series as well for the rookie manager. And let's just be honest, like before we even get into our segment, which is about coach manager decisions and Will Venable, let's just be real for a second before we can nitpick, on him. A guy like Will, who I thought was one of the best candidates to hire, I really feel, I know it's small sample size, but to begin this season, we've seen it before, OJ. Managers give us the nice managerial talk to the media, but they don't back it up. However, with Will Venable, he's talked about aggression quite a bit early on, in February. And you're seeing it. This roster is actually starting to follow through on that talk and putting it forward on the field. Most specifically with aggression in game situations. But go ahead and take it away, OJ. I know you're a rant guy, so go ahead.
No, so I think that I've already seen a couple of tweets out there about we should have gotten Ron Washington and because they look at other teams' records. And at the end of the day, Will Venable is a first-year manager, okay? You could be a coach in the big leagues for 35 years until you're the guy making the calls and being the skipper. You really don't know who you're going to be. And what I like about Will is that Will's being Will, okay? And that's a good characteristic for him because you could say that the guy that was here before was being himself, which in my opinion was just a guy that was full of BS, okay? I think Will brings something that's very a good asset. What I've seen so far is that he is managing to the team that he has. Okay. And when I say that is that when you have a team that you have to manufacture runs, he knows he doesn't have a great offense. He tries to put guys in motion, trying to create situations for where you can score. Okay. And again, there's things that as a first year manager, for example, he didn't pinch run for the guy on second, the guy that, eventually got hurt. Could have brought in a pinch runner because the guy was kind of hurt. But again, it's probably the weirdest play I've seen in baseball in a long time. I like the way that he doesn't say a lot in his press conferences, says enough. He's getting these guys to compete. Staying in games and kind of I haven't seen any like bad body language. And that's what I want. And so he's trying to make things happen. And it's hard, man, when you're a manager and you have a set lineup. And I'll talk about experience, for example, Ozzie in 04, 05, 06 was a lot easier for him than 07 because, for example, in 07, there was a lot of injuries. So you have to start kind of figuring out like, okay, where am I going to put this guy in? Or you have too many DHs. That starts getting hard because when you have a really good team and you don't, I don't think Ozzie had to really think about it. Ozzie was just worried about who's going to hit third. I have 4 guys that can hit third. That's a great problem to have. But when you when you're dealing with these players, you really have to kind of create magic. And we've seen Will play with it and try to make sense of it. He hasn't fallen in love with a player. Will could say, well, Corey Lee is the older catcher, and I'm going to give him a lot of chances, and Corey Lee's going to be the catcher, or now Narvaez, and just play him every single day, regardless of how well or bad they do. We've seen him kind of switch it up. But I think that I've seen positive things. I think that he's going to be his culture. He's going to be his guy. So I like what I've seen from Will so far. Nothing the way that he has. And, we've seen him in the bullpen management kind of change it up. Tried Clevenger in the 7th, then tried him as a closer, trying to figure out guys in high leverage situation, because again, he's experimenting with these guys. A lot of the guys are in development. So, other than Martin Perez, you don't want to put a kid out there and kind of like, you want to see him fail, but you don't want to push him where he's never been. You got to take him slowly, and he's done that. It's easy throwing out a veteran out there for another 6th inning or 7th inning, but he's been timid enough where you're not exposing any arms, but he's also been aggressive enough where he's taking some chances on some kids that you're seeing them grow in some situations where you might panic and go to the pen and go to the guy with the most experience. And it's funny because Sox fans got on him because they're like, why didn't you take out Clevenger? He's the closer. For that game, he was the closer. And had Clevenger gotten the outs and gotten the results that they were looking for, he would have gone out there again and closed. Okay? He would have found a closer. So I think we're just going to see he's going to get better as time goes on. I'm still very positive on Will. And the players seem to react very well to him. I think that we're going to see some positive things from him. And again, looking at the little wins, and one of them is being aggressive. I hate when managers are like, oh, we're going to be aggressive, and then they don't steal base. We've been through that. Okay. Or guys just selling you smoke, and he's not really selling you smoke. He hasn't come out and said, we're going to whoop on teams. And he's had a chance to. He's had a chance to say, when they've been playing bad or good, he's been able to keep the even keel. And I think the team, at 4-11, had a couple guys executed, on plays that they had made. They could be 7-8. But they're gonna be some growing pains. And as long as I see the guys on the field play hard, that's what I want to see. And Will's done that. And they've gotten better defensively. We haven't seen many just really dumb plays that you're like, what are these guys doing? So far they've played some solid baseball, all around, even though the record doesn't show for it. Because again, they don't have the offensive threat, but on the defensive side, they've run the bases well. And it's really sad when you look at a team go 1st to 3rd and you're like, oh my God, they did that really good. Because other teams, that's just natural. It was just so bad before that a 1st to 3rd gets you excited. And that's how much of a rock bottom they hit from a managerial standpoint, that anything that you see improvement on. And again, I think that the best thing that Will has is when you're down there in the field, you don't feel the toxicity anymore. You don't want to avoid the guy because you're like, this guy, number one, he thinks he's too much. He thinks he's good and you're not good. It's optimistic. It's positive. He's got an aura of like, oh, this is cool. Will's a cool guy. And even when they're interviewing him in the, when Brooks doing the post-game interview, he does well. And you got to protect these players. He's not out there. And again, I think one of the biggest mistakes people make with managers is that if you love guys like Ozzie Guillen, you're expecting guys like Ozzie Guillen, or Will trying to pretend that he's a guy like Ozzie Guillen, and he'll snap. He'll get kicked out of a game eventually. But little things. There was one, before we get off on Will, there was one play, and it was against the Red Sox, and it wasn't a play. The umpire missed a couple calls down low. And sometimes when you're a first-year manager, you can get intimidated. You don't want to go out there and get on the umpire. The umpires, they'll let you know that you're a first-year manager. Shut up. I know my zone. You're here for the first time. And Will was doing it like he was letting him know. Okay? And sometimes, you're timid. You don't want to get kicked out. Will was letting him know, where's that pitch? Kind of like that interaction. And he has good communications. I don't know if the guy before the camera wasn't on him a lot, but it looked like he never talked to players. It looked like he never communicated with players or the coaching staff. It was him and his buddy that he brought with him that was not the bench coach. That was not he was just like, he just talked like his best friend, but he wasn't the right-hand guy. But he was a right-hand guy. Will seems to have his coaching staff kind of like around him, and there seems to be communication. I think there's better communications with Katz already. I feel like Pedro was like, I'm a better pitching coach than you. Like, I know more than you. So I feel like there's more communications within the staff just from watching the games when they're not on the camera, just like the talking. So I think that's a positive.
Yeah. Now, before I get on that particular play I mentioned earlier, you mentioned something that kind of made me chuckle because you said that we're finally seeing a couple really good defensive plays in the mix, and I can tell that they've been working on that, the defense in particular, and it's something that gets mentioned in spring training. But there was a pickoff play, you probably saw it at the game today with Gilbert, that normally I don't think that play gets pulled or executed correctly if it wasn't for the change with manager here. But just to give a little spiel for our podcasters, Vaughn gets off the grass on the pick play, gets to the bag. So it wasn't delay of game, because if he stayed on the grass, it's delay of game. And I saw that in the MLB, I think it was yesterday. But not only does, Vaughn get off the grass, but when he gets on the dirt on the bag, he turns to the inside, throws it down the second, and gets the runner. I think it was actually right after the play I was going to mention earlier. So the fact that it was like a bam, bam, a good defensive play, a terrible one, I was like, holy shit, like, not only see Vaughn execute that, but even though Vaughn, first off, Gilbert's been pitching really well since getting called up with, I think, the 2 innings this weekend. But Vaughn not allowing his performance at the plate to affect his play on the field, executing, getting the out at second in a close game, really well executed all around for that was Amaya at shortstop, but from Gilbert to Vaughn to Amaya, spectacular. And I'm going to get to the play now. So you got Baldwin in right field, 2 outs with Shane in the 6th, and granted Crochet's pitching that no-hitter, but 2 outs, fly ball hit to the warning track. It looked on television right away that, Baldwin didn't get to a spot. He was just drifting, loses it. I'm like, okay, whatever. But then you have, I don't know what, OJ, what your view was on that play, but on the television feed, I see, Meidroth pulled over in the grass in the outfield. But then there just doesn't look like communication, because you got him drifting out off the line, and then you have Vaughn. He was still on the grass in the infield on the line. It wasn't lined up. It didn't look like there's communication. Baldwin, after, misplays it, picks the ball right up, overthrows it right back or a little bit past Vaughn. Vaughn scoops it, and, by then the runner scored. But I hate, now granted, in previous seasons, I was always disgusted with alignment, cutoff, execution, whatnot. It sucked that Baldwin had, was drifting to begin with, and just how the whole play fouled out. But I want to see that cleaned up a little bit. Granted, Baldwin was in left field, from the reps I've seen previously in the outfield. I'm not sure if I can't remember if this was his first reps in right field. Obviously, Meidroth was just called up and playing at second base. So if there's miscommunication, so be it, because these are the early on reps. I'm sure that's going to get better. But, this is stuff that I'm sure Will took mental notice of, and hopefully gets adjusted.
Well, I think that, so the problem with before was that those guys have been playing together for a while. Mm-hmm. Okay. And the last year's teams, the last couple of years, they weren't really big on taking infield, outfield from what I was told. But if that happens, and that's happening multiple times in a series, and it starts happening in June, July, after these guys have been up for a while, then I'll say, what the hell? Okay. But those are the things those are like the wins and the improvements that the coaching staff can have, and say, we cannot let this happen again. So I'm hoping Will, his infield instructor, and all of them get talk to them and say, okay, number one, and kind of break down the mistakes. Because, this is not basketball where you're passing the ball all the time, but alignment, the more you play together, the more you kind of know guys' arms and, you know, where guys are going to be positioned. And those are the things that Sox are going to have to kind of like learn on the fly and kind of like use the non-games to get those reps, especially for someone like Baldwin, like Meidroth, who are going to be playing multiple positions. And then for someone like Vonnie, kind of knowing, you know, arm strengths from who's playing today and what, kind of knowing, you know, okay, it's not, you know, today's Baldwin at left and not, you know, who's playing in center is not Pantera. Kind of like getting that field, because that happens, and you sometimes you see that with the middle infielders of like you know, that communication. And the longer you play together, the better you should be off. But you know, it was one of those plays. Again, it started off bad from the beginning, but you know, he didn't show frustration, didn't show anybody up. But those are the little things that in between games, in between series, that Will has to address.
Yeah,
and address it the right way, not benching, or just addressing it the right way.
I did mention great play, you know, Vaughn, prior to what I just mentioned here. But on this play, look, I need to hold, you know, Vaughn accountable even on this play, right? Because he's the guy on that infield that has the most time in the major leagues.
Yeah.
You need to once you see Baldwin start to drift, right? You gotta at least begin that communication with Meidroth.
Yeah.
Get him lined up, or I don't know how if Will wants that throw to go to Meidroth or Vaughn in that situation.
Yeah.
But as the experience, I don't care if he's first baseman, but as the experience, the captain out there, well, I don't want to say he's a captain, but guy with the most experience in that infield.
When he is the guy,
get that communication, start lining him up. Yep.
So Andrew Vaughn, sorry to cut you off. So Andrew Vaughn's in a weird position because he's not a veteran in the sense of like he doesn't have 10 years in the team. But sometimes you have to become the de facto guy. Okay. Yeah. You know, Omar Narvaez, as he gets called up again, you'll see him trying to be more of a leader because he's been longer in the big leagues. Andrew will have to start stepping up because when you look around, you say, wow, I'm the guy that's been here the longest. I should know better. So it's kind of like helping out the guys that to do this. And again, I'm not going to blame Meidroth because obviously he wasn't in the White Sox organization for a while. That's another thing. But those are all things that they should be working at in Charlotte, in Birmingham. And those are things like when I'm watching minor league games, like I'll give you an example. Like when the White Sox, and I did a lot of scouting because of the Winter League for minor league baseball, the White Sox were horrible at moving runners over and driving them in. They were horrible at cutoffs. So it was like they were crap. Big leagues, AAA, AA, single A, they were crap. So people look at winning records. You can have the records, whatever. To me, at the end, it's like, how are you developing and what are you doing as a team in those things? Like, are you a solid? Because when you're building, and that's what I feel like White Sox fans want. They want a great organization. And that's something that the Atlanta Braves for a long time, the St. Louis Cardinals for a long time, the Minnesota Twins, no matter who they brought up, they were not guaranteeing you hits. They were not guaranteeing you home runs or 10 Ks per game, but they all knew how to play baseball. You will never see little things like that falter. And that's where you want to get of like, if I bring somebody up to any position that we can at least do the fundamentals the right way. That's what a solid organization starts to create. Like, I'm going to have enough solid players at a big league level, at a wins above replacement that we can compete. Then you sprinkle a couple superstars and you got yourself a pretty good organization. So those are the things that when I'm looking at development as a team, those are the things that I'm looking at. So from a Sox standpoint, it doesn't, you have to nip it in the butt right away, you know, and the good thing is, man, when you have these young players, no one can be bitching about doing infield, outfield. Nobody can be bitching about early hitting because we're tired. And I think that was a struggle because there was a lot of veterans on the Sox that the former manager didn't want to do that because, oh no, you know, like they're treating White Sox fans and the former staff were treating Luis Robert like a veteran. Dude, you haven't even hit free agency. Okay. So there's different ways to address teams in that. And I hope Will, you know, gets those guys to work out. And from what I've seen and I've heard, when I've seen with myself, they're out there working on stuff. But those are the things you got to work on. You know, you're competing on the field, on the plate and chasing and whatnot. But every game, even if right now, the White Sox win or lose, They have to be developing guys. And that's something that in the last rebuild, I used to tell Sox fans, and they're like, Ian, you're such a hater. You just hate it because your father. I'm like, no, dude, we know baseball. They're winning games based on pure talent, but they suck at playing baseball. They're not doing the little things. And when they have to compete and they face other great teams in big moments, that's when it's going to count. Okay? Moving the runner over, getting the bunt over, first to third, cutoff mans, getting out of jams. Because it gets to a point where your natural God-given ability at the big league level, there's going to be a video, there's going to be a scouting report that you will not be able to compete. And that's, people think it's crazy. Like me in high school, I could just show up and just hit. Okay? High school was not a challenge. When I went to college, different ballgame. And the reason I did not keep playing in higher levels and most people don't is because I did not keep developing. So that development at every level, travel baseball, 11U, 12U, like most players don't keep developing because it's very rarely you see the kid that's 12 years old, that's fat, that's hitting home runs, become the really good player in high school because they think that they're studs and that they don't keep developing. And that happens a lot with guys that are top prospect and really good. I'll give you my guy, Yohan Moncada. He's still the same player that came from Boston. Yes, he's super talented because he's got so much talent, but he didn't develop to keep making himself a better player. Tim Anderson, who made the big league team because a player was hurt. He wouldn't be on that team. Eloy Jimenez did not make the AAA team, did not make the big league team with Tampa because their God-given talent only took them to a level. Yes, it's a big league level because they had so much talent, but they didn't keep developing. And that's where these guys need to keep developing on things like that. Cutoff mans, like you need to keep developing in order to reach, your potential of some guys.
The opening day series versus the Angels, Ron Washington, you probably saw it in pregame. He had both Tim Anderson and Yohan Moncada working mechanics on the ground right in front of him. Like he's not afraid. He's not afraid to go up to these vets
and say, "Hey, you got to work on because while you're here, you're back in the doghouse." And that's and again, even regardless, if the White Sox were 11-4, they still need to be developing.
Right.
Because they're not at that level. And that's the mentality that Will needs to have. And that's why when people talk about a job, like, oh, who's going to take this job? Everyone wants a big league job. Nobody turns down big league jobs. But a lot of veteran guys don't want to manage teams that are not ready to win because they don't want to develop. Yeah. They want to sit there and have the Joe Torre Yankees of like, you just make the lineup and you kind of don't have to develop. Some guys enjoy that aspect of the game. But it's getting guys better. It's getting guys to know how to play baseball. And I'll give an example before we jump off to the next subject. But nobody gives enough credit to guys like Jerry Manuel, okay? Jerry Manuel, when Ozzie came over to the Sox, the guys that eventually became the core, Creedy, Rowan, Garland, Burley, PK was already already had been in the big leagues for a while. Those guys were already really well seasoned. I guess I can throw PK in there because he had been there from Jerry Manuel's start. They knew how to play baseball. Okay. Ozzie didn't really have to go out there and be like, this is how you play the game of baseball. They needed a push that they were already at average to get above average. Will Venable is trying to get him to average, and hopefully he keeps the job and he gets to be with them in the playoffs and whatnot. But a lot of people don't give credit to Jerry Manuel of like, yes, they made some tweaks, but the guys that we kept in the core, Ozzie wasn't like, oh my God, these guys can't play baseball. They're horrible. No, these guys were pretty solid players. So it was more of a mental fix and getting those guys to be confident in themselves. But from a day-to-day player standpoint, I remember when they thought Ozzie was crazy because they asked if Brian Anderson was bunting in the minor leagues. And they're like, no, he's hitting third. And Ozzie was like, Brian needs to learn how to bunt. Because when he comes to my big league team, he's going to be hitting 7th or 8th. And I'm going to be asking him to move runners. So, yes, you are the third hitter in that. So that's where you have to see guys and how they fit on the team and how good of a player you're going to be. Because, you're not going to have Lenny Sosa hitting third on a winning team. He might be on the team, but he might be hitting lower. And that's something, before jumping off with Pantera, where I think Pantera's a solid player, but I don't think he's a superstar that everyone thinks is going to be the guy that's going to carry you. Like, he's not a PK third hitter I'm Miguel Cabrera. I think he's good on a team, but he's not the dude. He's not the third hitter. Like, he's not that guy right now. So you have to see his game kind of change. So you have to say, okay, do I trade him and bring more guys in because he's not going to be that guy? Or am I scared he's going to become that guy somewhere else? Because I don't think he's that guy. He's a solid player, but I don't think that right now on this roster is the guy that you're like, that's my third hitter. That's my future. That's my Frank Thomas. Let's ride it. Okay. I don't see a Frank and Robin and say, we're going to ride with these guys. Or Maglo, Carlos Lee, where you like 3 and 4 every day, let them develop for the next 4 years. None of those guys are here yet. They might be coming up. The pipeline is full with guys like that. But you need to know and play the game and develop. And development happens at every level. People think that when you get that call from Charlotte to Chicago that your development stops. It doesn't. Then you become like a big league guy, and then an everyday big league guy, and then a superstar. And then when you're a superstar, how do you become a dude? And a dude, for anybody that's not out there, a dude is when spring training started and you looked at Paul Konerko, that's 30 and 100. Okay? When you look at you look at a guy and say, oh, that's 30 and 100. Like, that's when you become a dude, not 1 year. And so there's levels. And I think people associate talent with how much money you make, and that's not the case.
Right. And you said it perfectly, because I was in a little debate about Elko, and the discussion ended with me telling someone that didn't believe in development at the MLB level. And I'm like, listen, it happens at
that guy's whoever told you that guy's an idiot, because Elko's proven himself enough. And the part with Elko that's really interesting is I hate guys that strike out a lot. Okay. But guys like Elko, Jake Berger, Sheets, and I'm just giving a couple examples on guys that have been here currently. If they strike out 200 times, I don't care. Because your job is, if you hit it, you have the power to go deep 30 times.
So all right. We're going about.
No, but I'm saying, but they have to see him. They have to see him if he can do it at the big league level, because the hardest thing, every level when you jump is hard. Like, if you put anyone on this White Sox roster right now back to AAA, they're going to rake. They're going to hit 340 and hit the home runs. But when you come to the big leagues, that's the jump. That's a 100-point drop. It's a different game. It's like, they say for pitchers, like 1 inning in the big leagues, it's like 4 innings in the minor leagues. Just from the stress level, the guys taking pitches. So you have to develop there's so many guys that I have to see him do it at this level. So even Elko coming up, he's got to develop. You have to. That's the way that you become a better player and create studs and create a better team, is developing at the big league. Like, you don't think guys were getting developed? Joe Creedy from year 1 to year 2. John Garland's best year was not 2005. It was 2008. Like, guys develop. And there's guys that do it consistently, because you can't develop anymore. You don't go from 70 home runs to 100. You just become a dude. But you have to develop. You're always developing, defensively or offensively. You're always trying to get better. And that's just the nature of the beast, until you're an established big league guy with 6+ years of just massive production.
And I think we have fully immersed ourselves into this next topics. Let's just straight up go back to the farm system with AAA news. I'll roll across the board here, and you can finish what I have to say. So, because of Colson Montgomery having a true struggle, batting under 100, Ryan Fuller, your hitting coordinator, has flown on a nice Jerry jet down to Charlotte.
Is he on the Jerry jet? He's not on the Jerry jet.
He's on something.
He's on coach. He ain't flying on Jerry jet to go see coach.
He went coach to Charlotte, and Colson's first at bat pulls a home run. So hopefully, while Fuller spends his time down there instead of with Vaughny, hopefully Colson can get himself together. And because, listen, OJ, they're going to do whatever it takes, resources they can pull.
Well, they have to. They have to. They have to spend a lot of money on him.
Exactly. You drafted him in the first round. You're going to be spending all your resources to make sure you get the most out of him. Hopefully that gets done, because it needs to get done. But we got this next player that I put down with the question by BSBL tossed, mentioning Cuero. This is what I also want to. I don't have the inside talk. I know maybe you might have heard a little thing or two. I don't know. Cuero was hot in spring training. I'm not sure what adjustments they had him work on at the start of Charlotte, but he was hot in spring training. I think I just saw. I think he's batting 370 or whatever. He's hot. Contact's there. I'm surprised Navarro's just got called up with Lee going down, because I thought maybe that was your opportunity to bring Cuero up right after or right with Meidroth. I really feel he should be up. I won't say this week, but he should be up within the next 2 weeks. For me personally, because we're already done with the service time deadline. He's proven it. He's earned it. I just saw today he threw a runner out at third base, and that's not the only time I've seen him throw a highlight from Charlotte with him tossing out runners besides his offensive highlights. I don't know what else left he has to prove, but for me, he should be up within the next 2 weeks. See what he has at this level. And I also want to talk about Teal, because personally, I think it was a worthy debate for him to come out of camp as well. Now we're at the point where he went through a week and he's coming below his career numbers, which that's a whole conversation, OJ, because he's not a guy that has that elite pop. He's more of a contact guy, but he does have some pop to his bat. If you want to look at other high value touted prospects like Adley Rutschman, Teal's contact numbers are better than Adley's career-wise down in the minors. So, me personally, I think it's worthy that Teal, if it was strictly about production and ready for the majors, I feel like he could be up right now. However, the thing that I stall at when I'm saying this is that with what I just said about Cuero, what adjustments they gave him, what does Chris Getz ultimately want out of Teal? Because he emphasized in February versatility.
So go get your outfit, go get your right field and left field gloves, son.
Yeah.
Potential.
And you know what? If you're talking about versatility from college, and I know Justin brought up left field, I agree with Justin or Jay. I know Jay's not with us at the moment, but he will be on next week. He brought up versatility in left field. I think he could be a potential first baseman too. So if we're talking about adjustments to be made with versatility, he should be getting reps in left field and first base as well in Charlotte right now. I haven't seen those reps. I haven't been paying as closely as I probably should have of the daily stats and the daily positions, but that's a guy that, for the conversation of something to work on, that would be the versatility side of it, because I think he's proven he can be a major leaguer right now. But again, I think that's why ultimately I've said before, I think Cuero is going to be the catcher of this team, but I'm not arguing with the people telling me that Teal's a better catcher, because yeah, he is. But at the same time, with that same, defensively, yeah. I'm saying at the same time, though, even if he is, that versatility matters more than that discussion about who's the better defensive catcher, because that versatility matters so much with the long-term side of that, with that bat.
So here's my question. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So here's my question, whoever you're talking to on that. So why is Teal the better catcher defensively?
I think a lot of that has to do with the arm.
The arm, throwing guys out. Okay.
Yep.
So none of them are punch, number one. Okay.
No.
Most important thing for a catcher is blocking and being smart behind the plate. Okay. Teal was playing college baseball. Okay. With aluminum bats, college. Okay. At 20, at 22, 23 years old that he is now. Okay. Edgar Carroll, okay, who is 22 years old, has been playing professional baseball since the age of 18. Okay. So from a calling a game standpoint, he is above and beyond, okay, what Teal is maturity-wise in calling a staff. Okay. That's number one. Number two is, if people think that Teal's going to be the hitter that he's going to be, then why not let him develop at a position where he can become a real hitter?
Right.
Okay? Because there's only so many Buster Posies and Pudge Rodriguez's where you're your main offensive guy. And when you're looking for a dude for a corner, okay, because either the first base has to produce, the third base has to produce, or one of your corner outfielders, okay? I think that for him, if they both can be in the big league roster and share time catching, I think the reason that he's catching is because they're trying to develop him into a better catcher, because they're not 100% sure if Cuero's going to be the guy and how these guys are going to perform in the big leagues. Okay. So I think having them both and have catching and sharing time outfield and whatnot, when you're a good player, you just grab your glove and you go out there and you do it. Miguel Cabrera had never played outfield. He played once and then he went and played in the big leagues. Okay. So if he's really versatile, you just go out and do it. You don't need to be taking 100 game reps. And so I think that from a catching standpoint, they're still developing his catching, because this guy was in college, okay, less than 2 years ago. So I think that they're still trying to develop him at a catching position so that he can get used to, big league catching experience. I think that there could be a time when they're both up and you can see them share the time behind the plate, but you can see him in the outfield as well, because,
One sec. Have you asked by chance Cora about Teal when he was over there?
Well, they liked them as a catcher because they didn't need outfielders.
Yeah.
They liked them a lot. They liked them. Again,
But specifically as a catcher.
I think that he's a good catcher, but the thing is, just because he's good doesn't mean that Cuero's not a better option behind the plate. And I think that you have to see what they do at the big league level. The other part is this, though. Teal has not played a lot of minor league baseball. Okay? So he's never had a full AAA season. Cuero is, if he kills AAA and he doesn't struggle in it, it's like there's no other place for him to go. Where Teal, if he struggles in the first couple months or whatnot, you can say, well, he's getting adjusted to AAA. But I can see both of them being up and seeing what you have.
Yeah.
Because if you have them both in the roster because they're both MLB ready, you figure out what you're going to do with them on the field, like defensively wise.
Right.
Because you have another bat. And that's the key. I think that you're looking for bats, and that's what I think the Sox are so interesting. Of how do you build? The White Sox fans just think they're going to get the next Buster Posey with him, so they want him behind the plate. But then, if that's the case, then you flip Carroll. If you put Carroll on the market right now, you'll get something for him. If you put Carroll on the market today, there would be teams calling you and saying, "Hey, we'll give you something." So that might be the case. That if you're going to have to trade one of the two, I think Carroll gets traded before Teal, just because he came on from the Crochet trade and whatnot. So I think that they're just really evaluating, and they're not. If this was the last organization, they might have made, Teal and Carroll both starting catchers back to back from day one and given them extensions. But I think that they're both developing well. I think Carroll's a natural catcher. Teal has the God-given ability to move around better than Cuero does. It's the A-Rod Derek Jeter thing. Was Derek Jeter a better player than A-Rod? No, not God-given talent. That's why he moved to third. Because Derek Jeter wouldn't have been a better third baseman than A-Rod. It's the same situation here. Again, not comparing the same type of player, but Teal is versatile. And if you have another guy that's catching, it's the reason why Paul Konerko played first base. He was a catcher when he started. Paul wasn't a bad catcher. They were just like, hey, we have a lot of catchers. This guy can play a little bit of first. He can develop his bat better. let's ride with him at first base. But I think when you have that ability of being able to play multiple positions, especially in your younger days, it gives your team that much versatility. So I wouldn't mind seeing them both. You could use Narvaez and send them back down. I don't think that he would mind. Meaning from a veteran standpoint, you'll probably clear waivers and whatnot, and see what they do at the big league level. Again, you have to see what they're going to be able to do at the big league level. They might come to the big league level and shit the bag. God, I have a list of catchers that have come to the big league level from the White Sox that have shit the bag. Top prospects, guys that we were giving plaques to, guys that were, Collins. Great guy, but never panned out. So again, the White Sox haven't had a guy that developed catching every day in a long time. AJ Brzezinski, I know White Sox fans sometimes are a little slow. He wasn't a White Sox guy. He was a free agent. So I think since Ron Karkovice, there hasn't been a guy that's been a White Sox everyday shortstop for 10 years in a long time.
All right.
I remember when people said that TA was going to outplay Ozzie Guillen at shortstop, and I laughed and I was cried out. Didn't make it to like year 8 with them. But again, if you can find a guy in one of those two guys to be your catcher for the next 7-8 years, you're a win. So the fact that we're having a conversation that you have two guys that can play potentially everyday big league catching, and then somebody has to go to another position, that's something that I think if you told Chris Getz that you're going to have this problem 2 years ago, he would have said, I hope so.
I just hope that the reason why Teal hasn't been promoted yet, because like I said, service deadline just came up on this past Thursday. So honestly, I wanted the 3 of them up to start the year. I'm not the guy that, I'm not the guy that praises, praises control, right?
Yeah, but you don't control the team.
Huh?
Because you're not the owner of the team or the GM.
But even if I was, because I
go back and forth with it.
I had this conversation last year off air with Dan Evans. I specifically texted him the question, because this is the time Oscar Colas we were having that debate about Oscar. Whether or not how that went, my question to him was about control of the service time. And right away he told me, Chris, the current CBA has the incentive that promotes production and development. So he was, and that surprised me, because a front office guy like himself, and I know he's not a guy that's retired and out of baseball. He's still connected with his. He knows he's in this game. He knows what he's talking about. And I'm a guy that's willing not only to, I'm not going to have my own bias coming into that, so I'm just learning what the knowledge that he has to give to me. And I'm completely grateful to get that information, because it makes me realize, a little bit more than to have those biases against it. So, and it helps me now because we just saw what Boston and Houston did with Christian Campbell and Cam Smith. So now we're at that point where, I don't want to get so, how do I want to say it's the best way? Basically, OJ, when it comes down to it, all I care about and the focus right now is development.
But I want to develop. You're right. I want to develop those guys. I don't want those guys to sit in the minor leagues for 1 or 2 years because they're scared of bringing them up, because you don't want to hurt their value. The quicker that they're
I don't want to ruin my relationship with that player and agent.
No, in the future. So, no, I think they might have done it just to be cautious. But I'll be completely honest with you. If any player in the minor leagues is killing it, be it Noah, be it any of those guys, you bring them up and you help and you let them get as quickly as possible acclimated with Will Venable as possible. You let Will figure out where they're going to play those guys, because the longer that those guys play together, okay, this is where development happens. They need 2 to 3 years of playing in the big leagues, okay, of getting on a big league plane, of learning how to, if I'm going to be a guy that's going to drink on the road, not drink on the road. If I'm going to be a guy that's going to get my booty hole tight because there's a lot of fans, learn how to play, in the big stadium, learning how to play when there's another team spending millions of dollars in scouting reports coming at me, learning how to deal with the media. Guess what? Nobody writes anything negative about Charlotte. But when you get to the big leagues, 670 The Score and the other 95 shows that we have for covering White Sox, they're going to be on you.
Yep.
Like, how do you deal with failure? Okay? Because most of the time, these guys that are coming to the big leagues, man, like, and Gordon Beckham has talked open about it. He had to learn how to fail in the big leagues because, Tio and Carroll, they've been successful everywhere they've gone. Played at a great university, high draft pick, whooped everybody in the minor leagues. You have to learn how to fail at the big league level. So the quicker they get these guys up here, number one, is going to be a lot of fun watching them struggle or do well, and then work with the staff. And they'll get to, because I don't care how many AAA games you play, you don't have big league umpires, you don't have big league pitching, you're not facing big league pitching. Even if you develop there as much as possible, you're not getting the big league experience. And you need to develop at the big league level. So I'm all for those guys getting called up. If they are ready to be called up and they're doing what they're supposed to be doing in the minor leagues, there's no point in holding them back at all.
Yep. We can talk about that for hours on end. To be honest
Correct.
with you. So I think you said it best, though. Again, that's something that we're going to be continuing to talk about because there's going to be so much more prospects to come.
And send them back down, too. They come up and they struggle. Don't be scared of sending them back down.
Because let's just say that even Colson, I know he pulled that homer today with Fuller down there, but if he continues to struggle, send him down to Double-A.
Correct. Colson, not to be negative, and I'm glad that he hit a home run, and I'm not a little concerned that it was a pull, but that's good. Colson Montgomery right now is in my OMG. He's either going to prove everybody wrong and show who he is, or he is going to be a big miss, because he is on that borderline of, before there wasn't guys around him developing, so you weren't noticing it as much. Now there's a lot of talent in the minor leagues, more than there was before, and you're seeing a lot of guys pass him by, and you're like, wait a minute, what's going on? And the way that this team is rebuilding, if your best player in the draft is a shortstop, they're going to take a shortstop. If the best player that a trade brings in is a guy that's big league ready to play short, and he's lucky right now that no one has solidified the third base position or the first base position. So you're like, well, if Colson doesn't play short, he can play third and he can play first. If he was in another organization and they don't have a third baseman or a first baseman because those positions are locked, and you only have shortstop, now you're getting concerned. So Colson needs to get it together and figure it out, and not. Once I look at players, I'm no longer looking at your draft pick position, and he's going to get all the resources, and he's going to get 1,000 chances because he deserves it, because they spent a lot of money on him. But there's a point where you have to get it done, and he's getting closer to that point.
To be fair, because I have to mention it because it doesn't get talked about, but if you go look at that 2023 season, off the charts. Whatever the hell they were doing after that season, looking back at it and making adjustments to his swing, I don't know exactly what they did, but boy, he fell off in 2024 and has continued to do so.
What level did he play in 2023?
Let me go back.
I'm going to look it up right now. You know what happened?
Was it?
He
That
went
was
to a better
Double-A,
league.
right? That was Double-A, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Which means that, again, you have to show that you can do it for more than one season and keep developing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the key, and again, I know people hate Moncada. We talk about Pantera a lot. You want to see studs in minor leagues? You want to see some ridiculous numbers in the minors? Go look them up. So, again, that's why. But at least for him, again, that you hang on, and Chris Getz hangs on to that. He's had one season in the minor where you're like, he did well. Okay. So you know that he's had some success at that level. Like you said, maybe you have to send him back down. You cannot be too crazy to you cannot be too scared to send people back down.
Correct. And again, not only did he have that season in 2023, the back issues do not help whatsoever that he got. So let's wrap it up on finishing with Elko, because you've mentioned it a couple times, and I'm just going to say this.
He's 28. You gotta see if he hits in the big leagues at some point.
So he hasn't been called up because of that high K rate through the journey of his minor league career.
If you see Elko hitting in a big league uniform at the DH position, even if he's a right-hander, he's going to scare you more than Manton. Manton does not scare anybody. Even he's got 2 grenades and 5 machine guns.
But so let me back it up a little bit, right? Because I mentioned prior how loaded of guys that you need that got the opportunity to develop in our infield. Our infield's full right now of guys that you need to develop, get that assessment of. So why am I going to add not only Elko to the 40 to the 26 as a DH when I've got Sosa there, Vargas, so many guys that I need to get the assessment of. And yeah, well, so he brings up 26. Regardless, look how many years he's had in the minors. He hasn't got that opportunity because of that K rate. But you've got so many guys right now that are going to be getting reps in our infield / DH that I'm not going to, at this very moment of, where are we at? April 13th. I'm not calling anyone up for him to get reps over right now. Now, go look at that K rate. That K rate does not get better when you go from the minors to the majors.
He'll be a strikeout machine.
So when you look at those stats, he's batting .270 with a .440 on base percentage. That's in the minors. When he gets to the MLB, his stats are going to be looking like Vaughn's, batting in the hundreds with.
But you have to, again, it's going to go back to Vaughn. Okay.
And by the way, Vaughn, because so many people want to take shots at him without realizing anything about the kid. Go up his career splits. Tell me what month is his lowest month.
He's a slow starter and a slow finisher.
Exactly.
Okay.
You got me. Because I'm happy you added slow finisher, because through the 5 years or whatever, he gets off to great. So after the month of April, right? May, June, he's already I think it was 22 and 23, May and June. He's already in the first baseman votes for the All-Star game. He puts hell of stats up to make it look like, he's on that potential. And then he gets to late August and then it just downhill.
He'd be great in the Mexican League. They only play till July.
Well, getting back to Vaughn, right? No one looks at the splits. So, and look, I'm going to hold Vaughn accountable. I'm not going to ride him, because you can even go back earlier in the show. I gave him accountability for the defense alone.
Yeah.
But you have to realize when it comes to Vaughn, right? He did not meet our expectations of him. Granted, sure. But there's no one in this system that is going to replace him at first base right now. Also, you got to realize that we tendered him. All right. He didn't get non-tendered. So we tendered him partly based off of the reason that last season, which if you look at those career stats, right, his homers were going up and then it collapsed last year. That was his true regression last year. What do you
mean collapsed?
His homer numbers.
That's
dropped.
Not a collapse. He went from 21 to 19. That's not a collapse.
But that's still regression.
Yeah, but it's not a collapse. That's just who he is. You guys just thought he was going to hit 30, but he's not a 30.
But it's also a product in that environment too. So when we go back to Vaughn, you almost threw me off track there. Okay, last season at technically his lowest value, right? You still had the Giants and the Mariners interested in him in those trade conversations at that low value. So Chris Getz tendered him because they believed that with the new staff with Ryan Fuller that they can get more out of him so they can use him as an asset to trade this deadline, right? So
Yeah,
why we it just drives me nuts that people
well,
don't
he's
even
an,
realize
no,
people
he's
don't
an,
realize he's a slow starter. They're just gonna jump on him right away. In the offense that is god awful right now, they're gonna single him out and look at the kid down there, hitting in a boombox. But anyways, so between Robert and Vaughn, those are the two guys left that you can get trade value for, essentially. So it makes no sense to put bring Elko up to play first base. However, I had that conversation all day today on Twitter, but people said, well, it's not about replacing Vaughn, even though that was what the conversation was about. Regardless, if you just want him at DH, I already went over the whole DH BS. My thing, though, OJ, is this. So everybody right now, I get it, right? You want to look at the prospects, you want to look at the slash lines, but you can't put emphasis on the slash lines. However, you got to look at the totality of those stats. Look at the slash line, look at walk percentage, look at the K rate percentage. If he has a great slash line, but the K rate percentage is above 30 and in the high 30s to low 40s, that's not going to translate well into MLB, where that slash line is going to continue to be good. It's just not. So what I will say about Tim Elko is this: to start in a small sample size of a week of baseball in AAA, that slash line's looking good at about the career rate that he's at right now with that slash line, looking good. K rate is down. So me personally, I'll be happy to talk about an Elko promotion in June. Give the guy a sample size that's legit to say, hey, he's earned it. He's truly lowered that percentage. He's having quality at bats. It's not just home run, blimpy single. It's legit at bats. Fantastic. Then we can talk about, hopefully, at the time when we get rid of Mattoon, Amaya, those guys. Hopefully, the next conversation is, hey, we're done with Vargas. Vargas is still hitting his career average below 200. We're done with him. We gave him all the opportunity. Who's next up there in Charlotte? Oh, Elko. Look, he's betting 270, whatever his career is. He's on that rate, but his K rate is down. Fantastic. Let's bring him up, give him at bats, wherever that may be. Fantastic. That's how I see it. What about you, OJ? Where are you at currently?
I'm trying to see. So there's been 14 games. 9 of those 14 games, your starting DH has been Canton.
Yep.
Manton, whatever his name is. I would have been like, let's send this guy down or release him when he asked for number 0. Looks so awkward, but that's just my personal choice. I'm just saying, like, if you were really moving the DH position around and you were using Robert and Vaughn,
that's another thing. They should be doing that, and that's what's driving me nuts.
They're not doing it. It's Manton every single day.
Yes.
They need pop. So that's where, if you are going and you're saying we're going to use the DH position for Vargas, because I thought Vargas was going to be the DH, to be honest, and Ram. So maybe and this is why this is like Elko's moment, I think, because if Brian Ramos comes up and he takes over third base, Vargas is either going to play first or DH, and I think he'd be better suited at the DH position. So you've given Manton the DH spot when I thought it was going to be used as kind of like, let's get at bats to people who's not in the lineup today and kind of just like move it around, to get guys at bats. But if that's not going to be the case and you're going to give Manton all the at bats, I'm like, I'll take Elko at this point over Manton. But again, everything's working against Elko. He's 27. They've invested a lot more in Andrew. Andrew's done it in the big leagues. He's had streaks of success, so you can't hold that against them. Again, they're probably looking for some production from him to either keep him, trade him, whatever it is. But it's going to be, as long as he keeps hitting in the minors, it's always going to be, it's going to keep being a name that's going to be brought up. But you're absolutely right. It's unfortunate he only plays one position. And again, when you hit in the minor leagues, people are always going to say, why is this guy not up? So if they're smart and a team calls for him, to be honest, they should say, hey, we'll trade you this guy for and get whatever in return if he's really not in the plans.
Yep, absolutely. All right, really quick, schedule and picks. Schedule, off day tomorrow. Off day just tomorrow. Tuesday through Thursday is going to be at home versus Oakland Athletics, who are a sneaky team right now, OJ. And
They are.
they might, if Seattle continues to struggle offensively, doesn't do anything with bats at the deadline, and if Houston continues to struggle, that's a team that might win a division that no one sees coming. Now, because I didn't even see these rookies that they have going off the way that they have been. Granted, it's a AAA ballpark at home, so folks bet when they're at home for those hitters. But pitching matchups Tuesday is the lefty Springs versus Burke. Wednesday's game, Smith versus, or not Smith. Bido versus Cannon. And Thursday's game is Sears versus Davis Martin. Of those three games, I think the best possibility to beat them would probably be that Wednesday game versus Bido and Cannon. I think Cannon can bounce back, and as of lately in that start, I still think Oakland will win the series at home versus the White Sox. However, I think I'd rather play them at home than on the road this year. So hopefully they can prove us wrong, OJ, but I have Oakland in that first series. How about you?
I wish that Oakland is obviously the Sox never played well there, but that was Oakland and not Sacramento. But Oakland on the road is at home. They're a 2-7 team, so everybody's hitting in that minor league park, and a lot of these guys might do better in the minor league park. They might feel more at home.
Yeah.
But I think best case scenario for the Sox in that series is actually winning the series 2-1. But I believe that they're going to be 1-2. They cannot. That would be okay. They cannot get swept by them because that leads to that Red Sox series. Where the Red Sox sweep you, you're like, damn, they just came from winning a series versus the Red Sox or winning 2 series versus them. So if you're going to Boston, hopefully taking 1 and going 1-2 and avoiding the sweep. So I think overall, I think that the Sox best case scenario is 2-4. Anything over 2-4 would be whoa. That was really good, but 2-4 is realistic. Anything not 2-4 is not possible because they cannot go on a 6-game losing streak right now. They cannot.
Yeah.
And
those hitters, the rookie shortstop is Jacob Wilson, and his rookie year batting .344 with a .344 OBP and a .508.
My guy Mike Kotze is doing a really good job, and they got some players.
Yep. Tyler Soderstrom, their first baseman, batting .305, 6 home runs, 11 ribbies. Real quick, OJ, if you're seriously, I'm serious about this. If you're Chris Getz, Soderstrom, I'd be calling their front office, seeing what they're willing to, if they're willing to trade him and what the value is for him, because they have a guy that they drafted 4th overall. I think he's a 4th round pick. By the way, Soderstrom's 23. They drafted the kid 4th overall, Nick Kurtz. I've been talking about Kurtz. I remember last year I think it was November I started talking about him, but that's a dude that I think you could have seriously, if you were Cleveland, considered him instead of Bazano. But Kurtz is ripping the cover off the ball in AAA. That is their first baseman of the future. So if you're the, I don't say Oakland A's because it's Sacramento, but if you're the A's, you got to consider, are you going to keep them both, or is Kurtz going to take first base over? How that situation is going to play out, we're going to find out. But if I'm Chris Getz, I'd be calling for the 23-year-old Soderstrom to see if he's my first baseman of the future. Let's move on to the next series, OJ. Friday through Sunday, you brought it up. Maybe Willowbrook should have said that when the Sox come back to play Boston, it's a perfect time to play them and not on the road. But we are in Boston for the weekend with a rematch on the rubber of Crochet versus Smith.
That's not fair. My guy Smith He got the short end of the stick going against a very dangerous Crochet, especially early in the season. Even if he pitches well again, Crochet can win a game 1-0, 2-0. He's going, in his head, he's going after this start. He's like, I'm going 8 innings. That's just the mentality for Alex and for him, saying, well, you already did it. I can definitely go 8 innings against these guys again. That's his goal. So Smith is hopefully he doesn't get the L. But again, you give up 1 run. The guy gave up 2 runs in 6 innings. A great start, especially for him, for anybody. So I think that you're going into Boston. That game is Crochet. Obviously Boston it'll be a big upper hand. But if they leave Boston 1-2, Will should enjoy a cocktail on the plane. Or I wonder if he's drank the champagne that we sent him. We sent Will a congratulatory champagne bottle for getting his first win in the big leagues. We did not do that for the last guy. That I guarantee you. But I think 1-2. I think if they can go 1-2, I think 1-2. You take 1 game in Boston. Again, Boston's a very hard place to play them always. Their team is pretty legit, but you got to figure out. Obviously, the Crochet game's the hardest game to win out of those 2. Out of the 3, you got to figure out, try to take one of the other 2 games.
Saturday is Huck versus Burke, which we like Burke. So maybe
I like that one. Then it's
Sunday is Walker Buehler versus Jonathan Cannon.
I think if I was putting a wager on the game, I would think that the Sox have a better shot at the second game.
Yep. I don't know. I mean, I would choose Buehler over Huck, but at this current moment, both are beatable. So
I'm just saying, I think once you've done facing Crochet, first game of the series, you've faced the nastiest guy.
Yeah.
So you're like, oh yes, this guy's whoever they face after that, the next day you're like, oh, this is a lot easier. So you're like, I feel like your confidence from an at bat standpoint. Because once you face him, that's the scariest guy they got. So I think that, again, if you have a good game against Crochet, like a 2-0 game, good at bats, you kind of put the ball in play, and you can go in that second game powerful. And obviously, you win that second game, Boston's got to come out to win the series, so anything can happen. And at that point, the Sox are just like, if we win, we win. If we don't,
I got them going 2-4. So
yeah, 2-4. If they go 2-4, they did their job. It's like playing 500 right now in this development phase. Anything not 2-4, something bad happened, because you got to take 1 game at least out of there. If you go 0-6, that's unacceptable. So 2-4. You go in there 2-4. This is us 2-4.
Well, it's that time of the show, OJ. Pick to click.
Oh,
last week we gave
embarrassment.
No. This is a sole present to you, because last week we gave you, who missed the show, the pick of Luis Robert Jr. Robert Jr. won pick to click. Justin's going to be upset because he had Benintendi, but we went 2 weeks. We didn't have a show last week. So I forgot to say, you missed the opening day show.
So I won.
You won, because this was a 2-week, not a 1-week duration. So you won, because I think he had 3 more ribbies than Benintendi did. So you start the pick to click 2025 season with 1-0 victory so far.
Wow. Okay. That's it's gonna be embarrassing if that's the only win I get, and it was a free pick.
Robert's off the board now, so go ahead.
No, of course. No. You know what? I'm gonna go with the kid that I like, Meidroth. I'm gonna
Meidroth,
but the surfer kid. I'm gonna go with him. I'm gonna take him.
Meidroth. You got Meidroth. Damn it. Well, since Slavko and Jay are they're not here. It's down to me. I got great selection here. Robert, Meidroth are off the board. We got A's coming in home.
Show your support. Show that you think that he is going to, because it's May, almost May. Or is it all April that he struggles?
It's all April. This is tough. I'm gonna do some quick homework real quick.
Vargas,
Not doing shit.
Manton. You don't want Elko. Pick Manton. They'll DH him every day. Okay, so this is the funny part. You're struggling to make a pick to click. How do you think Will Venable feels like when he's in the lineup?
You know what? Holy shit. This is rough.
Yeah, I was gonna go Lenin Sosa, but Lenin looks like he's never seen a ball or a strike that he doesn't like to swing at. He's chasing again.
All right. No, I mean Sosa's the second best hitter right after Robert.
Oh, I know
right?
that. I mean,
The
that's
past
what I was thinking.
the past week.
Yeah, I know that, but
All right, I don't know where they're gonna put him, but I'm gonna go with Brooks Baldwin.
oh, he's got to. This is the thing. That's a safe pick. He's got to be in the lineup.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't
And
care.
I don't think he. And the thing is, I don't know him. Again, I don't know him. He doesn't know me. But from what I've seen and heard, I don't think he's a guy that cares. He's just like, I'm in the big leagues. He's not like, oh, I'm being played out of position. That's just. And we'll ask Slocco and Jay to send us their picks so we can track them.
Yeah, we'll put that. I'll put.
We'll be on the show next week. If they're not on, we'll do a show next week.
Yeah, next Sunday we'll be back on.
Yeah, so we can cover all the new players that are going to be signed when the new owner comes allegedly from all the Sox fan.
All right. Shout outs. I'll let you start off. Shout outs.
Shout outs. Yeah, you know what? Shout out there to all the Sox fans that are out there still watching and supporting the team. I hadn't been in the stadium in a while that was exciting as the Red Sox game. I don't know if it was a giveaway, that the weather was a little bit better, but stadium was packed. Walk off. It's fun seeing that, it's everyone's being a little bit more optimistic, and that's a shout out I want to do.
I like it. And you prayed for Vaughn.
I prayed for Andrew Vaughn. As a good Christian, I was so negative on Andrew Vaughn, and I said I prayed for Andrew to have patience and be able to find himself, because the pressure's on him, man. You got guys in the minor leagues that are playing better. Things are moving around. Like it cannot be an easy place for him mentally.
I think Boston should trade Aroldis Chapman to the A's, and then I think the A's trade him back. A's trade him back to the Red Sox for this week. That way, Vaughn can play or hit against Chapman at least twice, maybe 3 times this week. I don't know what it is with Aroldis Chapman, but Vaughn sees him really good. If you remember that rookie year, he took him opposite field in New York, was it? Fastballs, yeah. And I think was it a fastball today that he hit?
I don't know, but he faced some guys you just see better.
I think it was a sinker. I think he threw the sinker, and
they all looked really good against Chapman, actually.
Yeah, that's good. My shout out, besides my fiance here, is going to go to BSBL Tossed, who just followed me on X. Thanks for the follow, boss. And he poses this question, and I'm not sure if you saw it, OJ. Thoughts on the Nightingale report of us wanting Outman for Robert? So dumb. Granted, it came from Nightingale, so I'm sure Getz had some conversation with their front office over the contract of Outman, but obviously in this report, I also saw they were talking about a frontline prospect to go with it, which makes sense, but who that frontline prospect is another question. Now, let's just say this, OJ. If that frontline prospect was either one of Zaire Hope, or who's the outfielder that they got from the Cubs, or Emil Morales, the shortstop, who I know he's gonna be in single A this season, but that's a 19-year-old Emil Morales. First off, Hope and Jackson Ferris, who they both got from the Cubs, both of those prospects in their farm are guys I have higher than, I think MLB Pipeline has them 7th and 6th or 7th and 8th, something like that. They're like 2 and 3 for me. I've got them really high on my rankings. But Emil Morales, he is my most intriguing prospect in their system, and I think he's going to fly up the rankings by MLB, Fangraphs, all these companies this season when they update it again in July. That's a dude that I don't think he broke the 100. I think I think it was Fangraphs maybe that had him 90 something, but I think he's going to fly up that board. DePaula, yeah, I know DePaula's up there too, but I actually have the 3 that I mentioned above him, but he's good lefty as well. But Emil Morales, Hope, those are 2 guys that if they're not on that deal, I'm hanging the phone up on the Padres. Or not Padres, the Dodgers.
By the way, shout out wise, this
Mhm.
week I'm a Reds fan, so
yeah.
Everybody root for the Reds.
So, did you make that pick?
I just switched it.
What was it before again?
Nationals.
Nationals. Okay. Cincinnati Reds. It's home and on the way, right? Or on the road, right? Split series?
Yeah, only 6 games though.
Okay. That's I like that pick. That's what I heard about that report. So brings me back a little bit. The 3 teams so far that have been in negotiations with Getz, that's public, is the Dodgers, the Phillies, and the Reds. So all 3 teams, you can come up with some solid packages for Robert, but Robert needs to go on a tear to get that value up. So we're gonna continue to see how that goes, OJ. But before we wrap it up here, Slavko teased us with Ishbia news last week. He's not here, so that was his tease. So I'm not gonna break that tease. So for everyone listening, I'm sorry you're gonna have to wait another week. Slavko has a sinus infection, so he's not on to break that teaser. But there is some breaking news with Ishbia that hasn't been completely broken yet, but we're gonna continue to talk about it and break a little bit more of that. I want to call it an iceberg because it really is an iceberg, but we're going to talk more about it next week when we come back on. What do you say about that, OJ?
That's fine. I cannot wait to see this breaking news of whatever
whatever Slavko.
The guy that's going to bring Ohtani to Chicago. I've heard great things about him personally. I've heard amazing things about him as a human being and like as a person. Don't know him yet. Haven't met him. I know that he's been at the Sox games a couple of times already. But yeah, I think that they're obviously when there's any ownership change, there's always change eventually. But I think that people are fantasizing of like, oh, if we get him, we're gonna get Ohtani and we're gonna sign guys for $700 million. Like, I don't think it happens like that quickly, but it's always fun to be optimistic, obviously, but it's a sexy name, not gonna lie. And I've heard great things, so I'm looking forward to seeing what Slav is gonna share.
Right. There's more to it, but I will say, because it was on Twitter, that they did publicly post the share percentage went up with Ishbia. Yeah. That isn't the news, but that was posted this weekend. So now we know where things are headed. But yeah, we're going to say that for next week.
Cool.
OJ. One hell of a show, boss. Thank you for everything, bro. To our listeners, thank you for everything. Thank you for your time tonight, and tune in. It's going to be next Sunday. We've been going Sunday for the past several shows, so
we should, because then the shows run too long. So let's just do Sunday so we can break down.
Yep. Tune in next Sunday night to the Blackout Show. Thank you for listening. Please like, follow, and share on any platform that you watch or listen to this. Thank you once again for watching the Blackout Show.